Well, now we have the pleasure of hearing Graeme Tobyn, whom I've known for quite a number of years. Graeme is a senior lecturer at the University of Central Lancashire, where he teaches research methods and supervises MA and PhD students. Many of you probably know that he is the go-to expert in Culpeper and has written the books like Culpeper's Medicine. He's co-author of the Western Herbal Tradition. He's written many articles on various aspects of Culpeper and his medicine and astrology. And today he is going to be speaking about Culpeper as our British Paracelsus. So take it away, Graeme.
Thank you, Doreen. Thank you. So we might not be interested in whether the answer is yes or no, but I hope you're interested in what we need to do to try and answer that question. So let's start with some very brief information about Culpeper. Born a gentleman, raised a scholar, dropped out of Cambridge, then placed by his maternal grandfather with an apothecary in London, where he started his 7 years training. Towards the end of that, he got married, which would have disqualified him as an apprentice, but maybe also radicalised in religion, and the Civil War was brewing, as we heard yesterday. So he dropped out of that and set himself up in illegal practice in London as an English physician. He fought on the Parliament side, wounded in the chest, which led to his early death, aged 37. But actually in mid-17th century London, that was kind of par for the course. And he dedicated his last years after the end of the Civil War. In fact, in 1649, in January, the king was executed in public. And in the September of that year, he published his first book, which was a translation of the Pharmacopoeia. He wanted to give a whole model of physic in English to the people of England, and astrology was a cornerstone of that approach. You may recognise some of the herbals here. The one on the left is actually from the original edition, 1652, the English physician, and you can see that the glyphs for the planetary glyphs for the herbs, the rulership of the herbs, is inked into the text. So Angelica at the bottom, a herb of the sun in Leo, for instance. So where is this idea that Culpeper was a Paracelsian come from? Here are historians of medicine on this. Strongly influenced by Paracelsian and chemical medicine, produced a pioneering series of books on astrological, herbal and Paracelsian medicine, produced his own aurum potabile, drinkable gold, a panacea of Paracelsian alchemy, and was dubbed after his death our British Paracelsus. And then Poynter, no wholehearted Paracelsian, yet his writings are strongly flavoured with the occult and mystical beliefs characteristic of those who were. So those are where we get the idea of Paracelsus as of Culpeper as a Paracelsian. These are some of the texts that I've used to answer this question. I want to point out Brian Copenhaver on magic and Hermeticism. We'll hear about that in a minute. We're going to hear at the end from Noga Aurika an important differentiation between what we might say is Ficinian and Paracelsian approaches in medicine, and then the books on Paracelsus are very numerous, and we'll see maybe a couple of reasons why that might be so. But those three texts I've used to focus in on Paracelsus for the information today. So let's move on to the macrocosm, microcosm idea and the three worlds, the elemental, the celestial and the intellectual. Culpeper, in a premonitory epistle to the reader in his 1653 translation of the Pharmacopoeia, talked about these three worlds. life on Earth, this is the plane we're in, everything here, the materials of the world composed of the four elements in varying proportions, and different species or things are denoted by their metaphysical substantial form. These things in the world then are influenced by the planets and the stars in the celestial world above, so that we get that idea of as above, so below. There is a tendency to influence material things in the elemental world. But above the celestial world, there is the intellectual world. This is the realm of God, of Plato's ideal forms. This is where we can rise above the tendency, the influence, of the stars. We can know what's coming up and therefore take the appropriate action in, as it were, in our own rational judgment, so that we can say the wise person rules their stars. It's the fool that obeys them. On the left, we have an image from Robert Flood. We have that same triplicity. We've got the threefoldness, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost in the Bible. In Flood, we have the abdomen, where we have the natural spirits of the body centered in the prime organ of digestion, the liver, but also the procreative spirit residing in male testes and female ovaries. Then in the thorax, we have the heart, where vital spirit is engendered out of pneuma in breath, and that's distributed around the whole body. It's elaborated in the head, the third area, to form our ability to move our muscles consciously, to make rational thought. We make judgments, we have imagination, we have memory. So there's a threefoldness here that is appealing, and particularly to a religious person such as Culpeper. Okay, let's take a look at what the issue is. What is Culpeper's astrological medicine like? This is the chart from the Herbal. This is the key teaching chart. So let's see what's going on here. This is sent by a reader. This is a woman in the reader's village in Bedfordshire. She's not well. What does Culpeper make of it? 23 Libra, 14 rises. So the woman, the sick woman, is shown by Venus up there in Cancer in the 9th house. But we have Mars rising in the ascendant in Scorpio, ruler of the 6th house. See 2 Aries 23 on the 6th house cusp. So we have a horary with the ruler of the 6th rising. This is a chart about illness. But that illness comes another way as well. The moon separates from the trine. The moon in Pisces in the 5th house separates from the trine of Mars and applies to the trine of Venus. The disease comes that way. One of the diagnostic issues for Culpeper is she actually pregnant? There is excess heat in the womb. Mars in Scorpio, is she actually pregnant? Also note Saturn at 21, Cancer 30. This is pretty closely square to the ascendant. So she is afflicted in the chest with tough phlegm and melancholy, Culpeper says. So that has to be remedied as well. But we start off with treating the more acute condition first, which is the Mars. And so Mars has no natural rulership of the womb, so the disease comes by antipathy, and so the treatment must come by antipathy to Mars, which is a herb of Venus. In fact, stinking arak. A herb of Venus in Scorpio, it exactly negates that Mars in Scorpio. This, Culpeper says, is a universal remedy for the womb. This is a panacea in a sort of Paracelsian medical sense. For the Culpeper also actually uses a cooling lunar herb externally over the area of the womb in the treatment. For the lungs, Saturn has no rulership over the lungs, so the disease again, or that affliction comes by antipathy. So he's going to treat it in antipathy to Saturn. The herb sundew, a herb of sun in Cancer, again negating the Saturn in Cancer. Finally, and very importantly, you need to fortify the afflicted part by sympathetical remedies and the ascendant. So he chooses tansy, a herb of Venus in Libra, which by sympathy strengthens the patient and the womb, which is ruled by Venus. So, having decided on treatment, you've got to find your herbs. So, where are you going to look for your herbs? To look at this on wormwood from the herbal. Wormwood is a herb of Mars. Where does he get that from? I prove it thus. What delights in martial places is a martial herb. Wormwood delights in places for about forges and ironworks. You may gather a cartload of it. Ergo, it is a martial herb. So, wormwood, a herb of Mars. But look, it is hot and dry in the first degree. It's not excessively hot. The actual galenic qualities of the herb are not matched to the astrological ruler. So it's just as hot as your blood and no hotter. Likewise, stinking arrack, that grows on piles of human manure. You know, when they swept the streets and piled it up, that's where you're going to find stinking arrack. So it's sitting on a pile of shit and it's Venus in Scorpio. Sundew, which you know is an insect-eating plant, that grows in bogs. Sun in Cancer, grows in bogs, flowers in midsummer when the sun enters Cancer. So there's multiple layers of symbolism that as it were, support Culpeper's rulerships. These are good examples, though. You're not going to find the herbal full of examples as good as that. But you know, I've written a paper on this, which you can read elsewhere. In fact, it was a Sophia publication. So, okay. Then you have to gather the herbs to make the medicines. You're going to make a syrup of arrack. So here are Culpeper's instructions for gathering it in order to potentize the remedy. Let the herb, for Angelica, which we know is the sun in Leo, let the herb be gathered when the sun is in Leo, the moon applying to good aspect, so maybe from Aries or Sag. Let it be gathered in the hour of the sun, or if you can't wait that long, in the hour of a planet that is a friend to the sun, or whichever planet rules the plant you're gathering. Let the sun be angular. We've just heard from Luis the importance of angularity. And Culpeper says, observe the like in gathering the herbs of other plants, and you may happen to do wonders. And in fact, you know, this instruction really is straight out of the Western magical tradition. You could set up a ceremony to whatever planet by following those same rulerships for the election of the chart for the ceremony or whatever. Okay, so where does Culpeper's astrological medicine come from? So the Hermetica, first of all, a group of texts translated into Latin by Marsilio Ficino, later grouped together with others, also written in Greek in Ptolemaic Egypt, on topics including astrology, alchemy. We might, among the iatromathical texts, that's the medical astrology of this period, include the Nicepso-Patersiris fragments, or other works on planetary rulerships of herbs and stones. The Hermetica is the source of as above, so below, and also nothing happens outside of a cosmic sympathy. But we could equally find these same ideas in the famous medieval book on magic, the Picatrix, which opens with aphorism 9 of the Carpos, or Pseudo-Ptolemy's Centiloquium, we might should refer to it as all things in the world obey the celestial forms, and also defines the sage as he who discovers the correspondence and unity in the occult, as well as the diversity. Now, according to Brian Copenhaver, the Hermetica was a jumble of contradictory doctrines that underwrote a popular spirituality. The theoretical principles of natural magic were compatible with Ficino's Hermetica, especially astrological causality as above, so below. But this is not analysable as hermetic in particular. In fact, he wants the word hermetic to be used primarily to name a set of texts, these texts comprising the Hermetica, or else to refer to a body of ideas or the people who held them derived from those texts. Culpeper doesn't mention the Hermetica or Hermeticism at all that I have found. So let's look for another source. Ficino himself, humanist philosopher, coming off that Neoplatonic tradition, a Catholic priest, a physician based in Florence, a translator of Plato's works as well, and that important book, 3 books on life that others have already referred to, 1489. Each book, the first book is on health, especially the health of the scholar, and how to avoid the diseases of the scholar. The second book on longevity, how to extend the life, negating that idea that the length of life is predetermined in the natal horoscope. And finally, the third book on astrological medicine, which here is a mixture of Hippocratic Galenic humoral medicine mixed with astrology and natural magic, for instance, in the form of amulets. Book 3 updates ancient Neoplatonic magic and redirects it to the practical end of medicine. Magic is now the capture and direction of the divine virtues in natural objects for the benefit of man by a priest-physician. So, yes, Culpeper's astrological medicine sounds like Hippocratic Galenic humoral medicine with astrology put on top. That sounds right. But again, Culpeper doesn't mention Ficino. He wouldn't like this idea of priest-physician because Culpeper's very much against the established church. He is radicalised in religion. And when Culpeper was alive, this is when Paracelsian medicine was at a peak in England. And we're going to look at this in more detail in a minute. But, you know, when we think of Paracelsian medicine, we think of alchemy. Culpeper says on alchemy, as to alchemists, I shall seem like Phormio, the philosopher, who, never having seen battle, undertook to read a military lecture to Hannibal, who was one of the best soldiers in the world. In other words, he knows nothing about the practice of alchemy. He says your best way to distill chemical oils is to learn of an alchemist. You're not going to learn it from Culpeper. And we know this connection between the planets and the metals in alchemy. The sun is connected to the metal gold, the moon silver, and so forth. And the same thing is represented in this table on the left from Basil Valentine's text. So let's take a look at Paracelsus himself. So born when Ficino was still alive, born in Switzerland, learnt medicine for his father, qualified as a doctor of medicine at Ferrara in northern Italy in 1516. This was the centre of medical learning in Europe at the time. Then he went on his travels, as many graduates did. We don't know where he went. Did he go to Scotland? Did he go to Egypt? We don't know. What we do know is that he enlisted as an army surgeon in several wars waged by Venice, Holland and Denmark. And in Salzburg, in a peasant uprising, he was arrested and nearly executed for supporting them. So again, another radical figure. He turns up in Strasbourg in 1526 and achieved some popularity and respect, not least through impressive cures of leading civic figures. He was a great healer by all accounts, Paracelsus. He was then appointed town physician in Basel in 1527, and this was the climax and crisis of his life. As town physician, he had the right to lecture at the university, but he antagonised the university authorities by breaking with tradition. He lectured on practical medicine rather than the sort of scholastic medical tradition debating issues in Hippocratic Galenic theory. He lectured in German, and a very apparently idiosyncratic form of German, which has contributed to a lot of misunderstanding about Paracelsus and led to some of the extensive publications on Paracelsian ideas, rather than in Latin, the language of science, and to an audience that included non-academic barber surgeons. And finally, he fled, he got into trouble. He was treating another wealthy person who promised him a lot of money. After he successfully healed him, he only gave him some of the money. He took him to court, then he committed perjury, and he fled. And for the rest of his life then, Paracelsus was wandering around. Where he would go, he would antagonize either the medical authorities or the religious authorities or both, and died in 1541, having only published a few books in his life. But his main texts were published after his death in Latin in the 1560s. And these are going to come through to Elizabethan England. And then the first translations into English of his main texts came through exactly when Culpeper was active at the end of the Civil War. So here we've got a bill that would be posted around the streets of the City of London by John Hester in 1586, advertising all the spagyrical medicines he could produce: oils, waters, salts, extracts, and other compound remedies. And historians talk about the Elizabethan compromise over Paracelsian medicine. They liked the medicines themselves, but they didn't like all the theory. So they accepted the medicines but kind of rejected the theory. People are reading these either in Latin, they're learned, or in manuscript. It's not filtered through to the public except with this new kind of medicine that's on sale. Two forms of these remedies are the antidotes and universal panaceas that prevented illness. That stinking arrow was a panacea, a universal remedy for the womb. Antidotes, of course, stretch back into classical times. And then secondly, specific medicines produced to cure specific diseases by sympathy. Specific diseases. Well, you know, we're going to see that the Galenic physicians, they didn't have a list of diseases. They treated the imbalance in the patient in front of them. Spagyric, these are spagyric, they're produced by distillation and calcination. They are to purify the essence of the substance, whether it's a plant or a mineral or a metal, to obtain the essence of the of the substance as the medicine. And then you only need to give small doses of that. Paracelsus said, all things are poison, nothing is without poison. The dose alone frees a thing from its poisonous nature. And these spagyric remedies could be given in low dose because they didn't upset the sort of ruling force within the body. No longer the soul or psyche, but the archaeus, as he calls it. So they're more easily assimilated into the body to affect their cure. Also, the idea that by studying things in the world and by experimenting, you can find a remedy for anything, which is different to what the Galenic doctors were saying. Oh no, we can't treat that. We don't have a remedy for that. For Paracelsian practitioners, there is a remedy out there, a bit like actually homeopathy today. So some of the Paracelsian ideas, they're drawn from natural magic. He learnt a lot from, you know, sort of like just lowly healers, you know, who work their own stuff. You know, for instance, kidney stones are cured by the preparation of other stones, or it might be herbs that grow on very stony soil. The archaeus is an architectonic spirit endowed with self-knowledge. It is the invisible seeds of things. which linked then the seen and the unseen worlds, and responsible for the generation of all things. These seeds and spirits then make the bond between the celestial and terrestrial bodies in Paracelsian astrology. He's not casting horoscopes, he's saying things like disease starts in the stars, plague comes from Mars. Metals receive celestial influences. In man, the faculty of imagination came from the stars as a sort of all kinds of magic. So Paracelsus is calling magic human imagination. This is what he means by magic, some of the time. Including the ability to read signatures, to look at a plant, to look where it's growing, and to have an idea of what that might be used to cure. And then sulfur, mercury and salt are the three prime aspects, the physical garments of these seeds, their proximate substance. These could only be made manifest by the spagyrical art. You separate the dross out from these tria prima, these three first things, sulfur, mercury and salt. When you prepare a remedy and bring those things back together purified, then you've got a specially potent medicine freed from poisonous quality by being perfected natural materials of a world ever in transformation towards completeness. Paracelsian ideas then come through to us in the modern world. We have, first of all, this idea of specific diseases. This is fundamental, taxonomy of diseases. You know, you go to the doctor, he has to work out if you've got a disease, and if so, what it is, before he can or she can do anything. Secondly, experimentation to discover the remedies and to prepare them. This is what the pharmaceutical industry does. And then you use sympathetic remedies, like curing, well, we don't see that in conventional medicine, which is still allopathic, but we do see it in homeopathy. So, in Culpeper's time, we can look at what Paracelsian followers proposed compared to your traditional Galenic physician. So, whereas the Galenic physician was elitist, you know, it cost a lot to engage him, and so he attended only the rich. Paracelsian practitioners were seeking a solution to the problem of healthcare for everyone, especially the poor. Galenic doctors go back to textual authority, Galen and Hippocrates. Paracelsian practitioners work in the light of nature. God has chosen them to be healers. You don't go somewhere and train. God has already selected you out to be a great healer. You work within the light of nature. True knowledge of nature is gained only when human experience becomes the knowledge innate in natural objects. The Galenic doctors, disease is individual. It's a humoral imbalance, different in each person, and they're going to spend lengthy consultations talking about your diet and lifestyle and how to correct that, your rich clients, of course, whereas in Paracelsian medicine we have this idea of specific diseases, the ontological concept of disease it's called, and actually, you know, once you know what the disease is, then the consultation is very quick, and then you've got a specific remedy for it. Galenic medicine treatment by opposite, whereas Paracelsian medicine treatment by sympathy, including the part affected. And then these low-dose tinctures and distillates, very easy to take, they're pleasant, whereas we know some of the Galenic treatments were very cruel. Vomits, purges, scarification with hot irons, keeping that wound open for an issue of humours to come out of the body. So there's the contrast, and so we can start to see that that Culpeper is definitely on the Paracelsian side. In fact, lots of irregular practitioners, those not qualified and members of the College of Physicians, like Culpeper, were attracted to that whole Paracelsian healer movement. Simpler in theory than Galenic physic. in the popular understanding, it has a magical element which they can identify with. There's a specific remedy for you with your specific condition, and no disease is incurable. Just looking at this, Stephen Pumphrey, my doctoral supervisor, in a great article, The Spagyric Art, or the Impossible Work of Separating Pure from Impure Paracelsianism, a historiographical analysis, tried to identify 3 kinds of Paracelsian in the historical record in early modern England. First, those appearing to follow Paracelsus. But Pumphrey says, well, this is impossible to identify owing to the shifting sets of concepts which in different decades was said to constitute the teaching of Paracelsus. And this wasn't helped by the fact that after the Paracelsian text came out in Latin in the 1560s, lots of other people wrote texts and put Paracelsus's name on them. And so some of these are pseudo-Paracelsian texts, just like there are many texts published after Culpeper's death that has his name on, translated by Culpeper. He had nothing to do with those texts whatsoever. Okay, so that's always shifting, so it's hard to place an actual Paracelsian teaching that you might then say, is this person following? Secondly, chemical philosophers who theorised on chemical medicines. Well, we know Culpeper did not have that knowledge. And thirdly, iatrochemists produced these spagyric medicines, used and defended them. Well, again, Culpeper didn't have that knowledge. Culpeper did not write Mr. Culpeper's treatise on aurum potabile. What about those then who called themselves Paracelsians in that day? No one called themselves a Paracelsian. It's historians today that talk about those people in the past as Paracelsians. So my conclusions then, like Paracelsus, Culpeper lived in Northern Europe, was familiar with and extolled native plants, the plants that grew there, not the ones described in the southern Mediterranean herbals, and was extreme in his Protestant views. He subscribed to a macrocosm-microcosm idea established by a wise God who set order in the universe. Paracelsus' exegesis of Genesis 2, verse 7, where God took a handful of earth and blew life into that to create man, is the connection between the elemental and the celestial world. So it's none of this tradition of Neoplatonic philosophy. It comes straight from the Bible. This is like fundamentalist Christianity. Learn how to heal from experiential knowledge of substances and their powers in the world, like Culpeper observing where wormwood grows and therefore going, that's a herb of Mars, and provide safe and effective remedies, especially to the sick poor, while showing care and kindness to patients. So in those senses, Culpeper is Paracelsian. But here's the key reading from Noga Arica. She says that Ficino's concept of sympathy differed from Paracelsus's like for like in this sense, that a black mood in a person, morbidly sensitive to the colour black, will be lifted in the presence of white. That's Ficino's Galenic treatment by opposites. While the alchemical approach of Paracelsus requires a specially prepared black as the remedy. So Culpeper's astrological medicine position is much closer to Ficino's. So the fact that historians of English medicine talk about Culpeper as a Paracelsian, in my view, plays down or maybe shows that they haven't considered enough the exact nature of Culpeper's astrological medicine. Thank you.